Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on July 23rd, 2014 at 14:10 in the afternoon, Eastern Daylight Time. Now, today is my son's 40th birthday. So, Thomas Carter Kersey is 40 years old today. So, happy birthday, Thomas. He and his family are down at the Outer Banks right now on vacation, and they should be back by the grace of God here late Sunday night. Don't drown. Don't get killed on the car wreck. You always worry about that when you're a parent. And I guess now a grandparent. So I thought today I might regale you a little bit with the how it went the day he emerged into the world. Well, actually, he was more or less dragged into the world. More of that anon. These gnats are just going to drive me nuts. So, when I had moved in with what is now my ex-wife. Well, moved in is sort of that's a bit of an inaccurate term, but spending pretty much every time, all the time I wasn't in school up at her place. In the last few weeks, well, the last couple of weeks of November 1973, after the great night of conception on November 2nd, 1973. You guys will hear about that later in August. So I remember that date specifically because the first Saturday I spent there, I watched the OSU Michigan State football game, and it was the one time Archie Griffin really played badly at Ohio State. He turned the ball over like 5 or 6 times. That's neither here nor there, but that's how I remember when it was I moved in. And now I was still maintaining my apartment down on Belmont Avenue there, just south of the medical school, because I'd go down there to, sometimes, occasionally I'd spend the night down there. I had to go down there every day anyway. I needed some place to basically just park my bicycle, if nothing else. And excuse me. So the day before Thomas was born, the night of July 22nd, Faith had, and I had helped her have this in terms of preparing and cleaning up and that sort of thing. A little dinner. There were about 6 or 7 people over, and we all sat around this round table. I loathe round tables. I do not like round tables. Said round table right now is upside down on the basement floor in this house. It was put there at the behest of my son, who really liked it. I guess he liked it enough to turn it upside down on its top in a wet basement. Go figure. It's not really a round table anymore. So, people left about, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock. See, this dinner was had after a day of my ex-wife's painting Now, admittedly, it was a latex paint. It wasn't like oil-based paint, but it was latex paint, and she had painted the front room that she was going to use for, where Thomas was going to, sleep and have his crib and the bassinet and all that baby stuff that you do. Well, if you can afford it, you do. And so, and then on top of that, she made dinner, and now I did the dishes. I cleared up and did the dishes. She went up to bed, and so I go up there, and it's about, and plus this was just a god awful hot day. I mean, this whole week was a god awful hot week, but you that whole night it never got below 90 degrees. So we're upstairs, and the house there's no air conditioning. We had fans, we had some fans on, but there was no air conditioning, and we're upstairs, and it's just god awful hot, and her water breaks. Now, it wasn't. Excuse me. It wasn't really a complete break, but it was a break. I mean, this wasn't like a leak. This wasn't like just a little leakage. And there was no bleeding. And then she went into labor, as often happens after your water breaks. But particularly when you're full term, she was actually. I think she was about 3 days shy of 200 and, well, we could calculate that out, but I'm not going to do it right now. But it's, the standard length of pregnancy for a human being is 266 days. And since Thomas was conceived on November 22nd, that's from date of conception. So you do the math. 1973 and 4 weren't leap years, so it should be fairly easy. So anyway, she started going to labor, and it's very desultory labor. It is. It's first of all, this was her first pregnancy. So she's a gravid of 1. Obviously, if it's your first pregnancy, she's a para 0, meaning para 0. And obviously, if it's her first pregnancy, she's never miscarried, so she's an AB 0. That's how they refer to these people. And she's 38 years old, which at that time fell into the category of an elderly primagravida. Nowadays, I don't think they call 38-year-olds elderly. I don't think they classify you as an elderly primagravida until you're having your first child or your first pregnancy up into your 42, 43. So I think they've shifted that definition a bit. But at that time, she was called an elderly primagravida. And that, by the standards of the time, that meant that she was somewhat at risk. And the child would be somewhat at risk. Now, she had been just a hair preeclamptic. Not overtly. I mean, she didn't spill any protein in her urine, and her pressure never really got high. But I think her blood pressure didn't get over 130 during the pregnancy. But she was all, she got all swelled up. I mean, she got all the edema and all the associated other. Now, she didn't get the petechiae, and she didn't get the vascular phenomena, but she was just a hair preeclamptic. So here she is in labor in this 90-degree upstairs bedroom, after her water broke. And it's 11 o'clock at night. Well, what do we do? Should we go in? Should we go in? No. I mean, there's no point going in now because, you're not, until the contractions get somewhere between 4 and 5 minutes apart, there's really no point going in. Plus, it's night, there's no point going down. Nothing's going to happen until the morning. And, just to summarize, that's indeed the case. I mean, the contractions got between from every 7 minutes to every 6 minutes to every sort of 5 minutes. And then they sort of seemed to stay there about every 5 minutes. And they weren't bad contractions. It wasn't like, contractions. It was, not even really enough initially to do that Lamaze panting, breathing stuff. Toward dawn, the breathing seemed to help her. It kind of helped me too because I didn't have to listen to the pissing and moaning. Of course, I had been awake all night as well. Well, that's what you do for your partner, don't you? You just got to be decent about these things. Well, you do. You can't be just some sort of male chauvinist pig. That was sort of the common opinion about me among some of her more, why didn't you kill this baby feminist colleagues? Maybe they were right. You make the call. So, all right. So it's time to do something dispositive about this early labor, and it's getting on to her like 6 o'clock, 7 in the morning, and of course I have to be down at the hospital. I was on the pulmonary service at that time as a medical student, and you've got responsibilities on the floor, so I had to get down there, and I said, look, I'm going to drive you down in her car. Actually, I might have had a car at that point. Well, anyway, I drove her down. And, flies. Oh, jeez. And delivered her into the emergency room and saw her installed in labor and delivery. And then I scampered over to Means Hall, to the pulmonary floor there where I was assigned, and started into my stuff with all the TB people. And don't even ask about my chest X-ray or my skin test after that month on that service. Thank God I've walled it off. And no, I did not take isoniazid either, thank you very much, because I want to try to keep my liver alive as long as possible, said he. So, okay, so I would go over there, obviously I told the people, what my situation was, and they said, well, okay. I said, but is it okay if I pop over there maybe every hour and a half? Well, every 2 hours or so, just to see what's going on. I said, yeah, but be quick about it. Okay, fine. So went over, at 11, and the contractions really never got closer than about every 4 minutes. And she'd been examined, and yes, indeed, she was in labor, and she was, like 4 or 5 centimeters dilated by the time she got there, but it was, everything sort of seemed to just be coming to a slow halt, and so they thought, well, maybe she didn't really completely rupture, so they did the amniotic hook and snagged your bag, as they say, and a fair amount of amniotic fluid came out, and in addition to what had come out the previous night. Excuse me. And so that seemed to speed things up just a hair. And And they put on the fetal monitor. They screwed the wire into the top of Thomas's head, uh, and she was getting a little dehydrated, although they were hydrating her, and she was getting a little febrile. She was running around 100.5, 101 temp, toward the end. See, this is so between 11 and the time of birth, which was ultimately going to be around 4, a little after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I guess he's really not quite officially 40 years old yet, is he? Another hour and a half or so to go. It was like, well, what are we going to do, and should we section her? And this, and nowadays, she would have just been scheduled for a section. And that wouldn't even be an issue. She'd just been sectioned. Or when she showed up and with her history and her situation, she'd just been sectioned. No doubt. I mean, just this 38-year-old uterus just pooped out. Is what it amounted to. Meanwhile, though, that was not the standard of care at the time, and so fortunately, she had an obstetrician who was a master with the forceps, or as we like to call them, the iron spoons. And I had seen this guy when I was doing obstetrical rotations. I had seen this guy. He'd pull stuff out of mid-pelvis. This guy was a master of obstetrical manipulation. And that's who you want. And that's who I sent her to. And Thomas got down to first of all, he was persistent posterior. He was persistent occiput posterior, which that's a deliverable lie, obviously. But most kids are occiput anterior, meaning they come out face down. If you've got the woman up like this, the kid's face is pointing down, hence the occiput anterior, up toward the ceiling. But he was persistent occiput posterior, and that always takes a lot longer in labor to do that. And sometimes they rotate, and sometimes they don't. In his case, he didn't. Well, so what happened is he got shoved down to mid-pelvis, and there it seemed to stop. Her uterus just crapped out. And like I said, nowadays she'd have just been sectioned. But long about toward 4 o'clock, it's time to shit or get off the pot here, and so went in, and Dr. Prince, my anesthetic hero, gave her the spinal, and she really liked that. She didn't like the stick in the back, but she sure liked the fact she wasn't hurting anymore. And most women don't like to hurt. I don't blame them. If we had to do that kind of stuff, the population on Earth would have been 0 for about the last. In any case, Dr. Rigsby, God bless him, he puts on the iron spoons and mid-pelvis and drags Thomas out, persistent occiput posterior. Of course, Thomas has he looks like a cone head, kind of looks like a wadded up wet rag, wadded up wet snot rag. A lot of these kids do when they come out, and he had these forceps marks on his cheeks, My nephew had a persistent forceps mark on his cheek for well, it wasn't a mark. I mean, you couldn't see it, but when he got mad, particularly when he was a kid, and he got mad, it would turn red. You see these red streaks on the side of his face from the forceps. Thomas did that briefly for maybe a few weeks or months, but that's when he cried. But it wasn't like he had. It wasn't like he had one of my. It wasn't like he had the. Where's that thing? Come over here. This dent from where I fell into the fire pit when I had my stroke. I think it gives me character. I know having the stroke gave me character. Or maybe made me more of a character. So, drag him out. And, of course, there's always that little moment where you wonder, oh, they're going to breathe. Ah, yeah, okay. And then there's the do they have everything? Are there holes? Are there holes where there should be holes? Are there no holes where there shouldn't be holes? That's really, yes, thank God. Yes. Is he one of these mongoloid dudes? No, thank God like 18 billion times over for that. And so there was. Well, that concludes the story of Thomas's birth. So happy birthday, Thomas. Now, I could go into the 5-day hospital course in which my now ex-wife had to deal with some, how shall we say, post-birth complications, for which I was blamed, of course. It was all my fault, of course. Well, hell, I mean, it's always my fuck up, and it's always a fuck up. Oh, yeah. Thank you, God, for not making me straight. Well, in the end, everything worked out fine. Thanks be to God. So, Thomas is 40. Paul's going to be 60 here on the 25th. And with any luck, I'll be 63 here in January. So, so we'll try to keep soldiering on here. So bye-bye, YouTubers.